If you stumbled upon this channel, chances are you've been Googling how to move to Mexico, living in Mexico, or being a digital nomad in Mexico. But what you may not know is that we're actually interested in a bunch of different countries on this channel. And in today's episode of Entrepreneur Expat, we're interviewing another expat for our Expat Stories series, Tiffany Grant of Money Talk with Tiff, on how she chose to leave North Carolina and move to Jamaica earlier this year. And Tiff's story has actually gone viral on the internet. She wrote a story for CNBC. It went live in September and it has taken over the internet streets. In fact, while I was reading the article today about her life in Jamaica, it was #1 trending on all of CNBC, and you guys may have seen it pop up on your Apple News notification a few days ago if you have that app. So her story has taken the internet by storm, and we have her here on the podcast today to talk about her experience. Welcome to Entrepreneur Expat. My name is Amanda Obeya. I am one of the duo in Entrepreneur Expat, and on this channel we talk all things making money online, global business, living in other countries as a Westerner, and we talk about everything in between. We like to talk about different countries and how they work and how they function and how expats are liking them. So if you're interested in that, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we have coming out on this channel. And if you're interested in living in other countries, one of the things that you need to figure out is how you're going to make money from anywhere in the world. There's lots of different ways of doing this, and what we have done is we have put together our Make Money From Anywhere guide, which you can download for free below. In that guide, you will learn the 5 skills that can make you money no matter where you are in the world, and honestly, it could even get you in the door of many different industries. It does not matter the country. And you're going to hear Tiff and I actually talking about how if you understand some of these skills and you have the recipe, then you know how to cook no matter where you are and make money. So with that being said, let's get into this interview. It's really interesting. We went into Tiff's story going viral. She's had a lot of trolls come after her, kind of like how we have on this channel, because people can't stand it when you're living your best life or doing something that's out of the ordinary. We also talked about why she decided to leave. We talked about some differences she has noticed now that she's been outside of the United States for a while. We talk about her making the move with 2 children. She has a 10-year-old and a baby. A lot of you guys have been asking, how do I do this with kids? So we went a lot into how she made that decision, how she's raising them, education system in Jamaica, all those kinds of things. She talks about how her health has drastically improved since leaving the United States, which is something that we hear a lot from a lot of these interviews, and we've also experienced it ourselves. We talk about cost of living, and we talk about a whole lot of other things. It was a really fascinating interview. I learned a ton because I'd been to Jamaica before. In fact, I'd been to the exact spot where she lives, but I'd been as a tourist, and I was only there for a few days right before COVID shut everything down. So to learn more about what life is like in Jamaica, which is not a country that you hear about a ton on the internet expat online spaces. You know, you hear about Dominican Republic, you hear about Mexico, Portugal, Thailand, Bali. You hear about all these super popular places. Jamaica's not one that tends to come up a lot necessarily online. So learning more about what her life has been like in Jamaica versus the United States was fascinating, and I hope you guys find this as interesting and as entertaining and as educational and as insightful as I did. Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of our Expat Stories series here on Entrepreneur Expat. Today I'm here with a colleague from my financial days who made the leap and left the United States for Jamaica, Money Talk with Tiff, who just wrote about her experience leaving the United States, now living in Negril, Jamaica for CNBC, and it went viral. So of course I had to reach out to Tiff and be like, hey, can we come talk about this over on Entrepreneur Expat? Because as another one of our colleagues from our finance day said, once the finance people start leaving, people need to start paying attention. So thank you so much for being here to share your experience leaving the United States for Jamaica. which is not a country that we've heard of often on this channel. We talk a lot about Mexico, we talk a lot about Colombia, Thailand, Portugal, but Jamaica is not one that comes up very often, but I do see more people moving there.
Yeah, for sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. And you're absolutely right. Like, Jamaica is kind of off the radar to most people when it comes to being an expat, but there's a pretty big expat community here that I'm learning.
You were in North Carolina previously. By the way, I could see why your article went viral because the way that you described living in Jamaica, and I've been to Negril, Jamaica, it's where I was right before COVID, actually, is very idyllic. So I could see why it went viral. I could also see why it pissed a lot of people off in terms of she's living her best life and I'm not. Is basically what that's about because we've also gone semi-viral and had a lot of trolls sending us to hell, and that's really all that's going on there. So let's get into, why did you make the decision to go from, hey, I've got an online business, we'll get into that. I'm in North Carolina. North Carolina was not that expensive, but I'm comparing it to Miami and Los Angeles, which is where Justin and I are from. But I'm gonna uproot my life and take my kids to Jamaica. How did we come upon this decision?
Yeah, so once upon a time, no, I'm just kidding. My first time coming to Jamaica was in 2022. And when I was here, I had so much fun. I stayed for like a month at that time. Me and my aunt, because it was to come visit family. My dad's Jamaican, and so it was my first time. I'm like, oh, I get to meet some family or what have you. And we went to like 3 or 4 different cities in Jamaica for a month. And so after that, I just fell in love with the vibe here and just the people and just the weather. Like everything just felt good, the food. And so this year, so 2024, I went again February because, mind you, in 2022, I was pregnant with my daughter. And so after I recovered, she turned a year or so, I was like, oh, I want to go back to Jamaica. And so this year I went back for the first time in February. And when I came back, I said, Tiffany, you might can move here. Like, let's start really considering this. And it was because I had just finished having a whole bunch of health issues at the end of last year. And then my divorce was finalized in January. And so that's part of the reason why I went on the February trip to kind of celebrate. But I was like, after all of that stuff that I've been through, after having the health issues and stuff, after realizing that the people here are very smart and, every time I come, I stay at an Airbnb, I interact with locals, like I never stay on a resort. And so me knowing the real people, I'm like, this might be a place that my kids can thrive to. So that all went into my decision to move here.
Is there any part of your decision or was there any part of your life in the United States where you were like, other than, divorce and health issues, which obviously are huge changes in someone's life, and you're not the first person that we've interviewed who had something similar going on, like huge life changes, I'm leaving. Even me, huge life changes, I'm leaving. But is there anything else that you've noticed just about, what your life was like in the United States versus Jamaica, where you're like, yeah, I'm good in Jamaica?
Yeah, so the peace that I feel here, which is so ironic because, the trolls and stuff online, they're like, oh, Jamaica's not safe, it's a horrible place to go, and
They
this,
say
that,
the
and
same
the
thing
other.
about Mexico.
And I'm like,
the whole world,
right.
according to Americans,
The
the
whole
whole
world
world
except
except
America.
America, there's like people dying on the streets all over the world except America. We know, we get the same trolls.
And it's ridiculous because, and that's how I'm like, I can tell you have never been out of the country
Yeah.
for real. And if you have, it was like a resort experience or something because here I feel way safer, and I can only speak for where I live, which is in Negril. Here, I feel safer than I did in the U.S. Like, people here don't just randomly have guns. When I went up to the U.S. to visit, somebody actually got shot when I was supposed to go out. And here, there was a situation where 2 guys were arguing at a bar. I'm thinking with my American mindset, let me duck and dodge, where am I
Yeah.
going to go? They just threw a couple punches. Everybody was taking shots afterwards, and everything was fine. I said, I can deal with this. I can do this.
In Mexico, we do need to be a little bit more careful depending on what area of Mexico you're in because of the cartels. But a cartel is basically a mafia. Their beef is not with citizens. Their beef is not with foreigners. Their beef is with each other and the government. They're not usually involving people who move here. Let's just put it that way. And normally, when there is a shooting in Mexico, it's crime related. It's not random. It's usually very, very targeted. So that it's the same thing. Like we don't have to worry about going to the market or going to go run an errand or any of that, and then worry about some person with mental health issues with a gun just deciding to shoot up the whole place.
Exactly. It just doesn't happen like that here. And like you said, we can only speak for where we live, but I'm like, at the end of the day, sometimes, maybe my door, I might forget to lock it or something, and it's fine. My neighborhood is so quiet. And, it's just, it's not what the media portrays. And that's what I've learned after not just coming here, but going to other quote unquote third world countries. They try to make them seem
Wait, hold on. Jamaica's considered
horrible.
third world?
According to according to them.
Oh, you mean according to the
Yes.
trolls and the media? Okay, I was like, is Jamaica's not third world? I've been there. Okay, air quotes. Okay.
I'm like, air quotes, yeah, whatever third world means. So anyway, it's very different than what they want you to believe. And even when I came down here to keep, prepping and stuff earlier this year, Jamaica had went up to a level 3, I think it was, according to the US. And it was like a week before my trip. And people were like, are you sure you want to go? I texted my friends here. I was like, is everything cool there? They was like, it's fine, Tiffany. Like, nothing's going on. So that's why I'm like, take stuff with a grain of salt when it comes to American media.
Yeah,
for real.
yeah, that's something that's come up a lot. Every once in a while, we'll have comments and be like, oh, but the U.S. Department of State. I'm like, the U.S. Department of State literally has every other country in the world on the list with some sort of alert, if you go look at it.
Absolutely. And here's another thing that I've learned since I've been here and also traveling to other countries. America is the least free.
Girl, let's
people
talk about
here-
it. Let's talk about it. Let's light the internet on fire. Let's do it, right? Because
Unpopular opinion, but
not
it's
on this
real.
channel, girl. Not on this channel. So let's talk about it, right? What do you mean? Because it's interesting that you bring this up because we recently had an email come in from someone in the community and they sold their businesses in the United States and they have money in Singapore. And they just got an email from their bank in Singapore saying, hey, we're going to start limiting services to Americans, which is happening all over the world right now, by the way. And she sent the email and she goes, the freedom that you have as an American is a total illusion and a farce. And you start to realize that when you live in other countries. So speak on that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you a real life example to start us off. So I was at a local bar, she was saying how it could get up to 30, 40 people there at one time. Everybody just having fun, laughing, joking, what have you. I had told her, I said, well, had we tried this in America with the size of your bar and the amount of people you're talking about,
the police would have been here. They would have been called. Yeah.
Shut it down. Yep. Somebody would have got
Somebody's
arrested.
Getting sued.
Like
yep.
it,
Yeah.
Yep. And so that's just one example. I'm like, in other parts of the world, there's not as many laws and restrictions and people still live fine. Yeah. And so another way I saw this, because I went to Africa over the summer too. I went to Guinea. And when I was in Guinea, I went to the U.S. Embassy there. It was the worst experience ever, just trying to get through security. And I said, this is like a little piece of America on the other side of the world. And once you leave that compound, it's back to freedom. And, you just feel so stifled. It was to the point where I was like, I'm going to just go put my purse back in the car because I don't know what else you want from me.
Yeah, it's interesting because the first time I went back to the U.S. after having spent a more extensive part point of time in Mexico, because I traveled a lot before, but I had never spent an extensive amount of time outside of the US. And the first time I went back, girl, 2 months, because I had to figure out my visa, finish some personal business stuff. Then we had to go visit Justin's family. It was like 2 months. We were back and forth between here, the United States, and the Caribbean. Girl, I could not wait to get out of the United States and come back to Mexico. And it was such a weird feeling because I'm Cuban, right? So my neighbors to Jamaica. So my family came to the United States, and half of Justin's family also immigrated, but from the Soviet Union. And you're told your whole life this is the best country in the world, right? So then it's interesting how you're first generation, I'm first generation, and Justin's first generation. And now Americans are not staying for generations upon generations upon generations. Now you have first generation Americans like us leaving for other countries. And then when we go back to the United States, we're like, what the hell is happening here?
Absolutely. I completely agree. Every time I get on the plane and as soon as I step foot in a US airport, it's like, I don't know, it's just a feeling comes
Everybody's
over
stressed.
you. And then,
Yeah.
yeah, and then last time I came in, I smelled pizza. I said, "Oh, pizza." I haven't had pizza in a long time. They have it here, but it's like the touristy places. So I was like, "Oh, pizza. Let me get some pizza." I got the pizza. I couldn't even eat half of it. It was so salty and it was disgusting. And I
Food
was
in
like,
Jamaica is
it
good.
also goes to
So
good. And everybody here can
Yes.
cook. Like, I have not had any nasty food here. Everybody can cook and it's just so good. But I'm like, the food in America is so salty, it's so processed, and if it's not salty, it's sweet. And even like I shipped food here, in a barrel because I was like, oh, that'll get me started or whatever. I couldn't even eat it after my taste buds had
Adjusted.
already adjusted because like the Vienna sausages, when I looked at the back compared to these that they sell here, 50% in America of sodium. Here it's like 10. And so when I taste, I said, "Oh my gosh, I can't even eat this."
Yeah,
It was
we just
horrible.
recorded a video about the elections because we were like, why these elections are making Americans want to leave America, basically. And how a lot of expats notice the same thing, that when they start living in other countries, there are certain things that are just like common sense for a country to figure out, the food system being one of them. And one of the first things that you realize when you've been living in other countries and you go back to the United States, literally every single person says the same thing: the food. Every single one says the same thing. And I'm like, yeah, and they're never going to fix that because the way that the system is set up right now in the United States, all those guys are paying for the campaigns of the people making the laws. So this is screwed either way. Either way it goes, you're screwed.
Right. And then that circles us back around to the health
Yep.
issues, right? Because it wasn't until after I started coming down here frequently this year, starting in February, where I started not having issues with high blood pressure, which is the issue that I was having last year. So I'm like, something is different. And to me, it's the food and it's the environmental stress. I feel like there's just an environmental stress in America.
What
as
do you mean
well.
by environmental stress?
Yeah, so going back to my example about, the disagreement at the bar and, I'm looking for somewhere to duck and hide. Everybody else is just chilling, whatever.
Oh,
And
I
they're
think
like,
I know where
oh,
this
that's
is going.
fine. They're
Okay.
fine. Right. And then the following week, I'm in America and the place where I'm supposed to go is, somebody has a gun. And then at the next place where I met my friends, because I didn't go to the first place, somebody lights off firecrackers. So everybody's already on edge about what happened at the last place. Then you got firecrackers going on. And then not only that, up there, you got a whole security system. Like, it's like a level of fear and stress that's just inherent in America, in my
We have
opinion.
security systems in Mexico, like your neighborhood WhatsApp, because there's petty crime in Mexico, unless you're involved in things you shouldn't be involved in, which y'all don't do that, please. That's how you end up in trouble.
Right.
And it's the same in any country. Does this bother you? Have you gotten any of these
Yes.
comments where people are like, you're only showing the good parts of Jamaica. You're not showing what people look like in the hood. And we'll get that in Mexico. Expats in Dominican Republic get that. And we're all like, well, why would we show you that? That doesn't make any sense. I wouldn't go to a bad neighborhood in my home country. Why am I going to go do it in another country? That doesn't make any sense.
At all. And I don't understand. And the crazy part about it is that's what they think the whole entire country
That's
is
what they
like.
think the whole world is like,
And-
except Western Europe
Right. Right.
and Japan.
No, you're absolutely
and the
right.
Western Europe and Japan,
abs-
right? But other than that, or in Canada, other than that, they're like, or Australia and New Zealand, like anything outside of the West except Japan, they think it's a complete shit show.
And it's so not true. And I feel like most of the loudest people with that are people that have never been, or if they did go, it was because they did like some mission trip or whatever, and they went to the worst part on purpose. Other than that, I'm like people that have gone and experienced it. And, you know, I've never met an expat or someone that's been out of the country and really experienced it and hated it.
Yeah.
I haven't met anybody
No,
yet.
because it changes your whole world. It changes your whole perspective on everything. Everything just changes. Okay, so how did you, or one of the things that you said in your article is that you said rushing is no longer necessary. And you said that there's a good side to that and a bad side to that. And I chuckled with your example because I went through the same thing in Mexico. But what do you mean by that? Rushing is no longer necessary since you moved to Jamaica.
Yeah, so what I realized, and this is the American mindset, right? We'll just say the Western mindset, where everything has to be on time. If you have a meeting, you got to be there at this time. If somebody comes to do work, you know, at your house or whatever, they got to do, like everything is very rigid. So when I moved here, one of my first experiences was getting internet installed at my house. And the people, first of all, it took forever for them to come. Then once they got here, you know, they were just chilling, you know, while they was activating it, just chilling. I had a couch on the veranda and they was chilling on the couch, watching videos, you know, all types of stuff. And so I'm like, with my American mindset, you know, y'all all right? You done? You know, what's going on? And they're like, oh yeah, we'll be done in a minute. So that's when I realized, I said, well, Tiffany, people here are not into the hustle and bustle of things. Like in America, had they did that, you know, you would have called the supervisor, they would have got in trouble, probably lost their job, you know, whatever the case may be. But here it's like the norm. And I appreciate it because it allowed me to slow down and start really just enjoying my surroundings, not being so rigid when it comes to time. And I feel more relaxed. Like time, having those rigid expectations when it comes to time increases your stress and anxiety
It
too.
does.
And so it's like all of this, all of these norms I have to unlearn. And as a result, I'm starting to live a better life.
And a healthier life.
In a health, right, exactly. Holistically better life.
we had a similar, like we're in the second largest city in Mexico, so there's still a little hustle and bustle because we're in the city, whereas you're more in a beach area. But even still, it's not anywhere near compared to what's going on in the United States, and it is a mindset thing. And I'm going to make the assumption that Jamaica is similar in this way. In fact, I know it is because I've been there, which is in the United States, people live a lot more isolated. Which I think contributes to the tick boom that we're all afraid of when we go back. Whereas in Mexico, and I think Jamaica is similar, it's a lot more community oriented. I think I heard you, I saw that you wrote in your article, like the neighbors actually know each other, for example, and help each other out. So can you speak more to that? Because the more time we spend in other countries where there is more of that community orientation, we've noticed that in those countries, there's far less mental health issues.
Yes, yes. And that is one thing that I fell in love with when I came here was as soon as I stepped foot on the property, you know, the yard, they call it the yard. As soon as I stepped foot, I knew almost everybody on the street. And it wasn't because I was, American and da 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 da. It was just that everybody on the lane knows
Yep.
each other. And they welcomed me in with open arms. I was just talking to my neighbor this morning, and he was saying how, here it's just a different vibe than, you can tell an American when
Yeah,
you see an
Mexicans say the
American
same
here.
thing.
You get
You
what
can
I'm
tell a gringo just by how they walk. Yep. Yeah, just
Right.
by how you walk, they already know you're American. Yes.
Right. And so for me, like even when I was back home in North Carolina, I knew maybe like 4 of my neighbors on the street, and I had lived there for like 7 years. There was a lot of people on the street. I had no idea who they were, because if you do see your neighbor, you just wave, hey, and then you go in the house or you go in the car, whatever you was doing. But here it's like when you see your neighbor, you sit down and talk,
Same
you
here.
see how they're
Yeah, same here.
doing, all types of stuff. And I feel like that has really contributed to my mental health, because it's like people actually care about you here. Not saying that Americans don't care, but I'm just
Americans live in
saying
their own
like,
little isolated world a lot of the time. Right. It's not that they don't care, especially when like disasters hit, obviously, like what we've seen in Florida and the Carolinas and Georgia right now. So it's not that Americans will like leave you for dead. We're not saying that.
yeah, no.
We're not saying that at all. Right. We're just saying that it's a more isolated kind of culture. It's a little bit
Yes.
of a colder culture. Like another example is like you'll go to the elevator. Actually, one of our Mexican friends said this because her ex-husband sometimes has to travel to Boston for work, and they share custody of their child. So sometimes the kid will be in the United States and she'll go to the United States to be with her daughter. And she's like, what is this weird thing that like you go in the elevator in the United States and no one even smiles or says hi or anything? Because in Latin America and in the Caribbean as well, that's like weird for you to be like in an elevator for somebody and not be like, hey, how's your day? Like that's just polite in other parts of the world to be friendly and open. And in the United States, it's funny, one of the first things they notice is how nobody talks to each other.
Yeah, nobody talks to each other. And I'm originally from New York.
Oh,
And in
girl.
New York, it was
Yeah.
like, don't look at
Yeah.
me. Like, you got a problem with me, that type of thing. And so here, it's just a completely different vibe. And it's like, for instance, my daughter was sick not too long ago, and they bought me all types of herbal remedies and everything. Like, it's just the community
Here
really
too.
bands
Yeah,
together.
herbal remedies are huge here too.
Huge.
Yeah.
I am learning. And that's the crazy part too. It's like in places like these, they don't really depend on Western medicine, but they live more vibrant, healthier lives, which is very
Mexico's
interesting.
a bit of a mix in that regard. So, I mean, we're taking holistic healing classes now as we speak, and we've learned herbology and all that kind of stuff. I think I have like a recipe book there of like Aztec elixirs that was gifted to us. But it's interesting. There's more of a mix in Mexico depending on where you are. So obviously we're in a big city, so there's hospitals, there's Western medicine, and I'll ask you about healthcare in Jamaica. In Mexico, healthcare is excellent. Another one of our friends who was in finance with us for a while, she told me this story about how they had a family friend who was diagnosed with cancer in the United States, and they were basically given a death sentence. They're like, you have a year to live, that's it. And I guess he didn't succumb to that, and he's like, I'm going to Mexico. And in Mexico, it was a mix of the natural healing, which is huge here because of their ancestry, and they really kept it alive, and also Western medicine. He's been in remission for years after he was given a death sentence in the United States.
Yeah, and that reminds me of that was another reason I decided to move to the Blue Zones documentary.
Yeah.
I think it was on Netflix. But yeah, here they have hospitals, doctors, urgent cares, all types of stuff, same thing. But what I've learned is they do a lot of bush medicine, which is like the herbs and things like that. And even in the US, I was like that. Like during COVID, I was making like this immunity is what I called it. And it was knocking COVID out, not making any health claims, but I'm just saying. But people were feeling a lot better after they would drink it. So I've always been into herbal remedies and stuff. But being here made me realize how much I don't know about herbal remedies because we're so quick to reach for medicine. And so even when I first moved here, I had to go to the doctor and I'm like, oh, what medicine you going to give me? This, that, and the other. And some of my neighbors was like, oh, you could have used this. You could have used that. And I'm like, I'm just not used to it.
Yeah, we're taking holistic healing classes now. And I had a headache at one of these classes a few weeks ago. And I had taken like the Mexican version of Midol, basically. And it didn't do anything for my headache. And I said at the class, I'm like, look, I'm having a really bad headache. And they all know how to put all the herbs and all that stuff together. And they made me like a tincture. And they're like, just take 10 drops of this. And it worked, right? And then they made us some free ones to take home for me and Justin. Because again, people are just very giving here. I'm like, how much do I owe you for this? And they're like, don't even worry about it. Like, we just made you a tincture for your headache. It's no big deal. It's fine.
Right.
And it knocked the headache right out. And I was like, what is in this thing? And they're like, well, there's an alcohol base because that's how you have to mix the stuff. But it's herbs and it's Bach flowers and that's what it is. I'm like, it knocked a headache out better than Mexican Midol over here.
Right. And I feel like that was one of the eye-opening things too. And to go back to your question about healthcare here, I had a situation where I was in the States because I went up to visit. That was actually to get my kids back in July. And I went to a doctor there. She wrote in her notes that it couldn't be what I thought it was, okay? I come back to Jamaica. I go to a doctor here. And that doctor properly diagnoses me, gives me what I need, and then I'm on my way. And so I'm like, and that just blew that whole myth about America has the best health care. And,
we all
whatever.
know that's a lie, girl.
I was like,
even Americans know that's a lie.
I went to the doctor there and they did not diagnose me correctly. I came here and I was diagnosed just like that. She said, oh yeah, this is that. Just right off the bat.
We've had a lot of people.
I was like,
we've had a lot of people in the comments. They've been in different countries, but because we're in Mexico, we attract a lot of people in Mexico or interested in Mexico, and they have used the healthcare system here in Mexico. And one of the things that they've said is that they've never felt so cared for in their lives, and that somebody actually listened to them. Like if a doctor here needs to spend an hour and a half with you, they will spend an hour and a half with you. In the United States, you're lucky if you get 10 minutes. And here, the other thing that they do, I don't know if they do this in Jamaica, but we live and die by WhatsApp in Mexico. Like our whole lives run off of WhatsApp in Mexico. And you will get your doctor's WhatsApp in case there's anything wrong. Like, hey, this medication, I'm having this reaction or whatever. Like you have them right on WhatsApp for whatever questions you have. And I was recently seeing a client of mine, a former client of mine in the United States, who went to the doctor. Her daughter has epilepsy, and she was going for a regular wellness check. And she just posted this like less than a month ago. I'm like, this would be crazy in Mexico and in most other countries. She started asking questions about her daughter's health, as any mother would do. And suddenly they said to her, oh, no, you can't ask that question because it's not on the approved questions. And if it's not on the approved questions, then we're going to have to charge you extra from the insurance. She lost her damn mind.
I'm like, what?
Yes, one of our former clients just told us that story less than a month ago.
Yeah, so here in Jamaica is similar. Like usually it doesn't take too long, but if they need the time, they will take the time because, that's just the culture here. And I'm like, and not to mention the stuff is cheaper, of course, than America. And at the doctor's office, they have all like if you need a prescription, she usually has it in stock. And so you don't have to go to the pharmacy, and doing all that extra stuff. So I don't know. I just feel like, now don't get me wrong. Of course, there might be some things that are better in the U.S.
Of course, absolutely.
When it comes to healthcare.
Efficiency being one of them.
However, right. But I'm like, it's an American myth that only American doctors know what they're
Yep.
doing. There's doctors all over the world.
Yeah, good ones too. I mean, and Guadalajara has some of the best doctors in all of Latin America. Ecuador is also known for having really good healthcare. Thailand has good healthcare. Malaysia has good healthcare. Yeah,
Everywhere
everywhere.
except
And in that political, the whole election video that we did, I'm like, this is another one of those common sense things, right? And people never can guess where Justin and I are based on the videos. We're like, we are team common sense, and we left. You know, Tiffany, I get the idea that you're there too, right? And most expats are.
Yeah.
But they could never peg us on where we are because we might say something along the lines of like, yeah, healthcare should have been figured out in the United States a long time ago. And then they'll be like, you guys are so liberal. We're like, no, it's just common sense. And the argument used in the by the left in the United States is like every other first world country has figured out healthcare. And I'm like, fuck that. Emerging countries have figured out healthcare, not just first world.
Right. No, that's so true. And I feel like that is the issue. But it's because people make money by people being sick.
The system is broken.
If
Yep.
Right. If the food can make people sick and then the people go to the doctor to go to big pharma and all of that, and then big pharma is who's funding the food supply. Like it's a whole big circle if you really pay attention. And so, of course, it's not in, best interest for people to be healthy.
Of course not. And it's
because who would make
it's not
money?
in the interest of the parties to go fix it because who's paying for their campaigns?
Exactly. So here we are in other countries where that type
It's
of
illegal.
stuff generally does not
It's
exist.
illegal in other countries. It's literally illegal.
And so, yeah, I can totally see how everything kind of plays together. And it all goes back to reason number 5,605 while I'm here.
So what is cost of living like in Jamaica? Because I would assume that it being an island and things probably need to be imported, and then things can be a little bit more expensive. Am I right in assuming that?
So it depends on where you are. I will say, I don't have one yet. Cars are extremely expensive. Food in my area is expensive, but I feel like part of that reason is because it's Negril, so it's really touristy. And so that was one point, and not to go off on a tangent, but I was telling some of the locals here, I said, if you all would stop taking the US dollar, then the Jamaican dollar would go up and things would kind of, level out a little more. But because this area is so touristy, US dollars taken everywhere, then it makes things more expensive. Like I was talking to a guy from Germany the other day, and he was like, I am so surprised with how much food is here. And I was like, yeah, that's one of the issues. Now imagine the locals.
No, food's cheap in Mexico. A lot of the food in Mexico is like, for example, we go to the supermarket whenever we need something like imported or specific. And we've done a video on that. But normally you just go to the butcher shops, or you just go to the vegetable. I mean, they usually have vegetables and fruits and everything you need, right, in order to have like a balanced meal. And then when you get the meat, at least where we are in Mexico, it'll be like meat from Jalisco, which is the state that we're in. Or a lot of the fruits and vegetables come from the agriculture in the surrounding areas, because this is a big agriculture area in Mexico. And there's a joke that Mexicans have, which is aquí no hay hambre, which means nobody goes hungry here, because the land is very fertile, and there's a lot of agriculture here. A lot of it does get exported to the United States, but there's also that's why coffee is expensive, actually, because a lot of the coffee gets exported, from my understanding. So coffee here is more expensive. But when it comes to fruits, vegetables, I mean, we have a friend in our holistic healing class that her family owns a strawberry farm, like a ranch, and that's what her family does. They're like, oh yeah, we've been growing strawberries. That's the family business. You guys can come and get strawberries whenever you want.
Right. So here's the thing about Negril. So Negril itself, it's not an agriculture place. It's like, I consider it like the Miami or the Vegas of the US, right? It's similar to that. So the fruits and vegetables even have to come a little far out, about 30 minutes or so, which is the next biggest city, the capital of Savlamar. And so even stuff like that is, when you compare, it could be considered expensive. However, I will say compared to the US, it's expensive for the locals and it's expensive for what it should be here. But when you compare it to the US, like people are posting about buying a few groceries and spending $100. I haven't spent $100 on a grocery trip here.
Yeah,
So,
neither
to put it into perspective,
yeah. I mean, maybe we'll spend that in like 2 or 3 trips, maybe, depending on what we're doing. And we are in a bit more of an expensive neighborhood, so they'll jack up the price a little bit in the butcher shops. But even still, I mean, the woman who helps us with cleaning and cooking in the house, she'll go to the butcher shop, she'll spend $40 and then make food for a whole week for 2 people.
Right, right. And even going down to that, like hiring help, like housekeepers, because I had a housekeeper.
Oh,
in the
light
States,
the internet
too. I
on
just
fire now,
always have
girl,
had a
with help.
housekeeper.
Light it on fire, because us Americans are supposed to do everything ourselves.
Well, listen, I I have had a housekeeper since like 2017. So of course, when I came here, I was like, I want a housekeeper. Of course, it's way less than the U.S. Daycare is less expensive. And I love putting money in the hands of the locals directly
100%.
because here, being that we're in a touristy resort type town, all of the money stays on the resort. All of the money comes in and goes right back out, essentially. And so for me, I like being able to hire locals. I have drivers, I have housekeeper, I have childcare, I have all types of stuff, because then it's infusing money into the local ecosystem.
Have you found that, because I've seen this happen sometimes on Facebook with Americans and some Canadians too, where because it's such an individualistic culture, they don't realize that in other countries it's like normal to have help. And if you're not paying for help, your family's helping you or the community's helping you, but no one's doing this alone because they all think that's stupid.
Yes, yes. Because even when I was in the U.S. and I hired a
You
housekeeper,
probably pissed some people off.
had,
Yeah, you probably did. Yeah.
oh yeah, I've had exes like, oh, you're just lazy. No, I'm
Yeah.
busy and I can, have someone help me. But it is the norm everywhere else. Like in my house right now, and most houses in Jamaica, they have a separate in-law
Same here.
suite.
Yeah,
Like,
they have quarters.
Yeah.
Not
It's
necessarily for in-laws, but for example, this house has a quarters for live-in help. Yeah, it's like normal.
Right. But I call it
Yeah.
in-law because that's what we call it in the States, but it's just a separate area where it has its own bathroom, has its own bed and everything. And so it's not like, even when I first moved down here and people found out that I was a single mom with 2 kids, 2 little kids, they were like, oh, hire some help, get somebody in there with
It's
you.
normal,
It's like,
yeah.
it's the norm here.
It's
Yeah.
normal. There's I don't know if you've heard of her, but you might enjoy her YouTube channel. It's called Ashley in Africa. And I want to interview her for this channel. But she's in South Africa or Tanzania, and then she was interviewing another American expat, and then they were saying how even raising kids and giving birth in Africa, they're like, we're never going back to the U.S. Because when one of them gave birth in Africa, it was, or at least that part of Africa, it was normal for all the women in the community or the neighborhood to go help the new mom. And like cook and clean or something like that. And in Latin America, it's not quite like that, but in Latin America, people live a lot closer to their families. So then the family kind of takes care of a lot of those things. Like my neighbor's sister just had a baby, and she's over here with the baby all the time. Or her parents are now helping her, living in and helping her with the baby.
Right. And to that point, like, okay, when I first got childcare for my 1-year-old, right? It's the norm here for the person watching your child to give them a bath before they come back, to do their hair, because that was one of the concerns I had, because I am at heart a boy mom and I don't know how to do hair. And so when I was in the States, my mom would do my daughter's hair. And so I was like, well, when I move, I'm going to have to. So like the first couple of times I did it myself, it looked horrible. But she was like, oh, I can do her hair. And I'm just like, I'm just not used to that level of care, that level of not
Yeah,
care,
it is
but
care in a lot of ways.
it's just a
Yeah.
different, yeah, it's just a different experience. You know, every day before she comes back, she gets a bath. She's already in her PJs. You know, her hair gets done, and all of this is like the
Yeah.
norm.
Yeah, I mean, the woman who owns this house, our landlady, she told us, she's like, yeah, I raised 3 kids in this house. I had live-in help. It's just like normal. It's not seen as like, oh, how dare you have help? You should be doing everything by yourself. Like in other countries, that's literally stupid. Like they're like, how could you raise a kid by yourself? Are you crazy? Like it takes a lot of people to do this. And again, they're more community oriented in that way.
Yes, and even when I was in Africa, where I stayed with locals, and it was like a little compound, and when somebody was cooking, everybody's like, "Oh, what you make?" You know, the kids, all the
Yeah.
cousins and stuff was playing together. Like it's just more family,
Yeah,
community
or like you'll
oriented outside of
probably
the
the same
US.
in Jamaica, but we'll go here to like a small businesses and we like know the whole damn family because like we'll even know the kids of the employees because sometimes the kids need to be there. Like there's a little one that we babysit sometimes, and I'll play like I'll play Mario Kart with him at the coffee shop if his mom's busy, right? But that's like it's not uncommon here if you like go to the local coffee shop or the local pastry shop that you're going to know the kids of the owners or you'll meet the kids of the employees or it's just a much, like I said, much more community oriented and everybody helping each other out.
Yeah, like for instance, my landlord, I joke with him all the time. I'm like, you might as well just adopt me into the family. Like I call him like my dad. You know, I know all his kids. I know his brother,
Yeah,
sister. Like I
same.
know the whole
I
family.
know the neighbor's parents. I know the neighbor's parents. Like I'm gonna go have coffee with
Right.
one of the neighbor's parents. It's like that here too. Or when we first moved into the neighborhood and some of the neighbors started seeing us with our dog out, they're like, "Oh, welcome to the neighborhood. We can invite you to dinner." Or like, my sister. This actually was interesting. Like my neighbor invited me to her sister's baby shower. I'd never met her sister before, but it was to start me making friends, and integrating into the neighborhood. Or we've had situations where some of our Mexican friends from our classes will be like, oh, hey, let's invite you out to like an art showing or let's go out to dinner. Or Mexicans will meet you and 5 minutes later, they're already inviting you out to coffee or something.
Absolutely. Every single time. Like I get so many invites to so many, like tonight, somebody was like, oh, come meet me over here so I can introduce you to more people. And that's how my community has grown so much here and so fast. Like when I first came, I met one person, they introduced me to a few people, they introduced me to a few people, like, and then it just creates this whole
Right.
ecosystem
Same.
around you, which is so
Same here.
different.
So, you mentioned that you brought your kids with you. You have a 10-year-old and also a baby. How did you make that decision? Because a lot of people, or how did you make the decision to be like, yeah, the kids are coming too? Because a lot of people will be like, well, I can't because I have kids. Or if they're not saying I can't because I have kids, then they'll say something like, I have to wait until they're a certain age. Now, you got 2 kids at very different ages in the age spectrum. So how did you make that decision and what helped you make that decision?
Yeah, so the first thing was a seed planted years ago. I had interviewed this girl on my podcast, and she was living abroad as a single mom with a young boy, little boy. And, I had so many questions for her at that point. I think that was back in like 2019, right? So then it made me realize, okay, there's people that's out here doing it. Now, when it came to my kids, my son was actually not doing too good in school in America, which I can understand because just how the curriculum and stuff is right now is just really, it's interesting. Like even math, the
Oh,
Common Core
girl.
math that they have, I'm like, why are we going around the world? And my son was
That's one way of
my
putting it.
son was diagnosed. Right. No, for real. I'm like, we could literally just do it the old school way and we'll get there a lot faster. So my son was diagnosed with ADHD, like a year or so ago. And so he wasn't doing really well in American school. Another reason I feel is because they had tablets and computers, and that's what they do their work on all the time. So anyway, I said, you know what? Looking at the kids here, because when I was coming to visit, like I said, I interacted with the kids, locals and stuff. I'm like, I wonder how schooling would be different for him there. And so I researched the schools. I actually know somebody that's on the Jamaican school board, so she was giving me some information and stuff. And I said, this might be a better opportunity for him. So fast forward, now that we're here, he's doing way better in school. I had told his teacher, American mindset, trying to give him a heads up. Oh, he was diagnosed with ADHD, this, that, and the other. And he's like, he's doing fine here. Like, he's paying attention. Things are fine. And it's because, in my opinion, one of the reasons is there's no devices. It's old school, like when we were growing up, where you had to write down everything in your notebook. The teacher had a blackboard or a whiteboard.
Now that I think about it, there's like a school around the corner. Now, I don't know how international schools might be. It might be a little bit different with the international schools.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But there's a school around the corner from where we live, and they'll have like the windows open because central AC is not a thing here. But it doesn't need to be. It's cool here.
Same.
But you'll see them, and I was like, I don't think I've ever seen a computer in there. Now that I think about it, or a tablet, I'd never noticed before until you just brought this up.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like it's been helpful because he's able to pay attention better even at home. And then also his handwriting is getting better. He said one of his first things at school, the other kids was like, oh, your handwriting, like, we'll help you. But it wasn't like a teasing. It was like, we'll help you, with your handwriting. But his handwriting is getting better because they're actually writing stuff down and not on the computer, just tapping away.
Yeah, and I know some things that people might ask, like, okay, well, what about English in other countries? Obviously not an issue in Jamaica. Everybody speaks English. But like here in Mexico, in the school system, well, there's international schools. But in the school system, like they start learning English at a very young age. And they're being taught by native speakers.
Right. Right. So, like you said, in Jamaica, that's not an issue because they speak English here. They actually use England's curriculum base. But what I also liked about here is that, Jamaica is a predominantly Black country, right? And so all of the school books had Black faces. And something just as small as that, to me, is a big deal because coming from where we're from, that's not
right.
The
depending
case,
on what state you're
America.
in, will depend what version of history you got and what mattered to the state.
Exactly. Exactly. So here, like that was one of the, once we went and got his books, I said, oh my gosh, like it's all Black faces and it looks awesome. So I feel like, and also I like how they teach the curriculum here, and I can only speak for my son's school, my son's teacher, but it's very interactive. Like he'll send videos on WhatsApp because WhatsApp is the mode of communication of choice. He'll send videos of them like playing different games, and my son was like, they have like a full hour for lunch where they can play and stuff like that. Where in the U.S. they were only getting like 30 minutes or so to eat and play.
Yeah, it's just a very like, and granted, like we still, and we're gonna get to how you make money in a second because I know everyone's wondering. So as we always leave that one for last. But it's interesting how like, we have mostly American and Canadian clients right now. So when it comes to work stuff, we'll still have a little bit of that American mindset, but even that's changed a little bit, because you like rearrange how you make money or you rearrange your life, or like you can go take a half-hour break and go actually hang out with a neighbor or go to the coffee shop, and it's like not a huge deal because it's just a block over. It's not like you have to get in your car to go do it, and how it's easier to kind of have a blend of that here, probably because of city planning and again the community orientation of it all. But even running a business where we have mostly American and Canadian clients right now, and there might be a little bit more of that just because we're working, and again it's the Western mindset and we like to work.
Right.
And we like money, then it's interesting how even that has shifted a little bit in terms of like we're just not as stressed in terms of work either, even with mostly Western clients.
Yes, I completely agree with that. I feel like as a result of moving here, I changed how I construct my
Yep.
schedules too. So I only do certain amount of meetings a day. If I hit that, I'm done for the day. And I might, like you said, walk up the street to my neighbor's house, chat a little bit, whatever. So I love that getting out of my typical environment made me realize how I can shake things up and how I can live life a little differently, a little more full. Because, and don't get me wrong, I still have a bad habit of working. Like my neighbors will come and be like, Tiffany, you still on the computer? Like,
See, that's not a
what
thing
you
in Mexico
doing?
because Mexicans work really, really hard. They just also like play really hard. Yeah.
Right. But they're just like, Tiffany, you still on the computer? Like there was a holiday here, right? It was Heroes Day just passed, and I was the only one working, probably in the whole island that day, because I had no idea. And also, I'm just like, it's just a regular day for me. But all my neighbors and stuff were like, Tiffany, it's a national holiday, right? Like people actually don't work on national holidays. And I was like, ah.
Yeah, that happens to us too because we'll know like American national holidays, but not the Mexican ones, and then it causes a little confusion, you know. Does this happen to you where that work is really just an American mindset? But here's what this is what has started
Yeah.
happening to us, where we'll have like Mexican friends who run businesses and things like that, and then we'll be like, yeah, I mean, we just started a brand new YouTube channel and made like 6 figures in 90 days, and all the people come to us, and we don't have to fuck around with WhatsApp, and they're like, wait, teach us how you did that.
Yes,
Is that
yes.
happening to you?
Yes, that happens all the time. Like, I have like some close friends and they're like, you literally just sit on your computer and make money.
Yep.
Like you don't have to go anywhere, you don't have to do anything. And I'm like, yeah, but that also wants me to teach people here how to do this because I feel like there are some really talented people here, very smart. And if they did, they would probably run laps around some of us. You know what I'm saying? When it comes to talent and then also, putting things into fruition. But anyway, I want to teach people here how to do the same because that's a whole other creative outlet, a whole nother opportunity that people are just not
Yeah.
familiar with. Like it's just not a commonplace.
Yeah.
So,
So,
yeah.
Tiffany, how do you make money? Because I know everyone's wondering, like, oh, yeah, this is all great and stuff. But because on this channel, accidentally, we thought we were going to be attracting a lot of people like you who'd been in business for a while and they were already making money online. Maybe they needed to streamline. And then we realized there's a whole untapped market out here of people still at jobs. Trying to figure out how to get out. And now a lot of the remote jobs where they were living in other countries and things like that are making them go back to the office. They're not allowing people to work from other countries. Or if they are, we're not even going to have time to get into this today. They still got to pay taxes as if they're living in the United States because they don't run a business. So they can't take advantage of a lot of the tax breaks. So on paper, they're still American paying U.S. taxes. How do you make money, Tiffany?
Yeah, so a few different, I mean, nothing has changed since I moved, but I still do speaking engagements. Like I just went to the US in September to do a speaking engagement. So I still do that. I am a blogger, so most of my money comes from my blog. So running ads, selling ad space, all types of stuff like that. That's attached to the blog. I'm a podcaster. Sometimes I get brand deals for that where people want to sponsor, things like that. Also, I do one-on-one counseling. So I'm a financial counselor, accredited financial counselor. I love helping people with their money. That's how I started. And so I still take clients. I still have clients from America and actually some here now that I'm helping get their money together.
You're
Oh,
good.
sorry. And then, I also do business consulting too, because I am a serial entrepreneur. I have ran businesses pretty much my entire life. And so I just love business and I help people both here and abroad with their businesses.
So I got 2 questions based on this, based on what we've been hearing from the audience.
Yes.
But before those two, where can people find you? Like if they need financial counseling or any of that, where can they find you?
Yeah, so you can find me moneytalkwitht.com. That's like my home base. You can find everything about me there. But also on social media, I have a little addiction. So all platforms at Money Talk with
So
T.
first question, and we'll hear this a lot, where there's just people in the United States, y'all just aren't making enough money to live in the United States, period, at your jobs and things like that. And things in the United States keep getting more expensive, but their salaries are not going up. They need to start, they're in a bit of a predicament where number one, you know, they might be in debt or the expenses keep coming up or they got to go Uber or they got like 3 jobs in order to go do something. What would you recommend to those people as a first step in terms of starting to build their life in a way where they would be able to go to another country? Because right now it feels like they're stuck.
Yeah, so first and foremost, know what you're doing. So have some goals in place. And once you have those goals in place, like people reach out to me all the time now that I move, like, oh, Tiffany, help me move. And I'm like, okay, where do you want to go? You know, have you looked at how much it costs to live there? Have you looked at, you know, so getting all of those things in a row is the very first step, like figuring out what it would take to actually make the move. And then the second step I would say is to, if you're not budgeting already, start budgeting. And I don't care what you call it, you know, you can call it cash flow management, whatever, but just know how much you're bringing in, where that money's going to come from when you leave, if it's not something that's virtual that you can do from somewhere else, and then figure out your expenses and stuff, both at home and where you're trying to go. And then build that out. So those were my first steps when I was thinking about moving here. Like before I moved, I had friends, you know, feet on the ground, like trying to find places for me to stay and things like that. And I'm like, one of my first questions with everything was, how much is it? How much is it? How much is it? Because back home, I'm jotting down, okay, this is my line item for this. This is how it's going to change. And so I had a good idea of what I could expect financially before I even set foot here. And that all went into like the planning process. Now, of course, don't get me wrong, there's always surprises.
Oh yeah, it never
like,
goes smoothly, y'all. Never.
Right. But you don't know these things until you actually do it. And that's what I tell people too. Like you can just try it, go with the punches. One of my first mindset switches was like, okay, Tiffany.
Us too, yeah.
If you fall flat on your face and you fail, okay, you go to Jamaica, things are not like you think they are, it's horrible. Guess what? You can always move back because I kept my house there. So I'm like, I can always move back, right? So that kind of gave me the confidence to want to do it. And so also think about those things too. Like there's going to be so many people that tell you not to, that you're crazy, that you're stupid. Why would you do that?
It's so dangerous. You're going to die.
It's dangerous. Like so many people will have so many different opinions on why you shouldn't do it. But if you are following your gut instinct and what you want to do, and you're already coming up with a plan, like I sat down with my mom before I left because she watched my kids for like a month or so while I got everything straight here. And I sat down with her and I was like, you know, this is what I figured out for this. This is what I figured out for that. This is what I figured out. And she was like, well, she was like, you did more planning than I did when I moved out of the state. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, if you have that kind of down pack, you have an idea, I feel like it makes things a lot smoother. And also building a community before you go to. So, you know, go visit the places, stay for a little extended period so you can get to know people, get to know the environment, where you want to stay, all types of stuff. And that makes it easier. So those are I know that was a long answer to a short question.
But it's a good segue into the final question, which is a lot of people they got to figure out how to make money online, Tiff. Now, you and I have been doing it for a long time, right? I'm not in the finance space anymore. I haven't been there for years, but I spent 8 years hanging out there before I transitioned over into other things. And now it's weird since becoming an expat and starting this YouTube channel. It's like I'm oddly going back there in a weird way, but right? Are you?
But here's the thing, Amanda, right? Because I'm starting a new venture as well. So I'm creating a tourist website for Jamaica. So for the whole of Jamaica, because I realize that's one of the pieces missing here is that the online presence isn't as big for these smaller mom and pop places or what have you. And so Right. So I'm like, I can be the solution to this and I can get more money into the hands of the locals. But my point is, once you know the recipe, you can keep cooking. So it's like, even though you were in finance, I'm in finance still, we know how to make money. We know the different ways we can make money online. So now it's like, okay, how do we do it again in a whole new industry? Because any industry, really, you could
It's just
do
repeat the
this.
process. It's marketing, it's sales, it's offer creation, it's rinse and repeat. It's basically
It's the
it's
same.
the same. Um,
Every
every
industry.
industry. So what would you recommend to people who are now just starting looking at online business for the first time? Because our methodology is basically like sell expensive stuff, which usually comes from your own brain. Because if the Mexican consulate is asking for $10,000 a month for you, your wife, and your 2 kids, you're not going to get that from affiliate marketing or from Google AdSense. So what would you recommend are those first steps for people who are like, okay, time to start looking into this, not side hustling on Uber, but like actually making money online?
Yeah, so I think it depends on, and I hate to go back to it, but what are your goals out of this, right? Because for me, like when I started Money Talk with Tiff, it wasn't to make money. I was still working full time. And even to this day, I really consider it more of a social enterprise than anything because it's a lot about giving back. Now, don't get me wrong, my business structure is set up in a way where I make money business to
Yep.
business. So that way I can keep my business to consumer or B2C low cost or
Yep.
free for my business. That's just because that's how I want to run it. And so it goes back to what are you trying to do? Do you want to run a social enterprise or do you want to run like a, I'm here to make money type thing? Because there's nothing wrong with either way. It just depends on
Yeah,
what
and
you
there's
want to
different
do.
structures. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. So it just depends on what you're trying to accomplish. And then you can kind of start building it from there. So me as a social enterprise type business, I like to kind of do the Robin Hood approach where I make money to pay my bills from the bigger companies so that way I can give to the smaller guys. And so, I think it just depends. That answer would depend
Yeah,
for sure.
100%. Well, that's actually a really good answer. And, that's what I did when I was in finance is
Oh.
like, yeah, I'm getting paid by banks, and then the blog and all that stuff is free. It's interesting because Entrepreneur Expat started as a side quest. And going back to what you said is once you know the recipe, you just keep cooking. So Entrepreneur Expat didn't necessarily start as a business. It started as a side quest, but because we know the recipe, we're like, if we're going to do it, we're going to cook.
Right. No point in getting all the ingredients together if you're not going to
Exactly, right, to your point.
But
we were like, this is a side quest, but we're going to set it up that if money wants to come in, it's going to come in.
Right. And not to discourage people, because some people might be like, well, Tiffany, I don't know the recipe. Yeah. That's what I'm here for, right? But that's why you look at what other people are doing. Like pick a few people, a handful of people that are doing the thing in whatever industry you're trying to get into and just see how they're doing things, because that's how I learned a lot going to FinCon, back in the finance days, going to FinCon conferences that people are talking about how they're making money doing what you're doing. And so it's like, oh, I didn't know I could be a freelance writer and make that much. Oh, I didn't know I could be a podcaster and do that.
I didn't know I could sell courses and make a ton of money.
Right. So you don't know what you don't know, but that's part of that goal. That's part of that homework, figuring out your goals, doing the research, finding the resources, and then start cooking once you have.
And what I'm hearing a lot of is set the intention and the answers are going to show up. And be serious about the intention, not just like this airy-fairy, like, oh, someday in 10 years from now, I'm going to move to Jamaica or Mexico or the Philippines or whatever. Like, really be serious about it. And then that's when the answers show up.
For sure. I tell you, it was the scariest thing I've ever did in my life moving here. I didn't make the decision to actually do it until February. I moved in May because I said, you know what? At the end of the day, I'm going to try it. And now that I've tried it, I worked through the hiccups and I'm like, this is the best decision I've ever made in
Same.
my life.
Yep.
So yeah, I feel like we have to get out of that initial fear that we have with things, and allowing other people to place their fears onto us as well, and just try it. The worst thing that can happen, you fall flat on your face. Cool, you learned a lesson. At least you tried it. You don't have to go to your grave and be like, oh, I wish I would have,
Yeah.
you know?
Which a lot of people are going to end up in their grave saying, I wish I would have, because they let those fears get in the way. And I'm sure you're still, I'm like maybe 6 months ahead of you, maybe a little more than that, 8 months ahead of you on the journey. And Justin and I were just having this conversation. Like when you first move to another country, it's chaotic. I mean, things are going to go wrong. Even if you like plan every single little detail like Tiff did. She's so smart. I didn't. It was more of a twist of fate over here. But I was like, fuck it, let's go. You know?
And I mean, at the end of the day, why not? Like, for me, I planned what I could. And that also comes from, I have anxiety issues. So that is something that I struggle with anyway.
Yeah,
so
so that
like,
helped
I
you.
have to have things
Yeah.
kind of in order.
But even still, with all that planning, things are going to go wrong. You're learning a new system. Like things are going to be a little chaotic.
You know, let me tell you, one of the first things, I think I was on like day 3 and the water was out. So that's one thing with Jamaica. I don't know if it's in Mexico too, but they'll cut off the water randomly. Like there'll be times where there's no water coming through the pipe.
Nope, haven't
Now,
had that
my
problem.
house
Not
has
in this
a-
part anyway. But that has
Okay,
happened in
so
other places
the-
where like we showed up to Sayulita and there was an accident at the water plant and they shut off the water in the whole town. Yeah.
So here's the thing. In Jamaica, it's pretty common across the island, okay? But places, some people have tanks. So I have
We
a
do too,
tank
yeah.
on my house that holds water. Okay. Now, I didn't know how much was in the tank, nor did I know, you know. So I'm on day 3. I go to take a shower. There's no water. And I'm like, oh, shoot. I had no idea that this was going to be an issue. So I had to call a water truck, have the water truck come out, which took a day or so because they're not just going to get up and come on your emergency. It has to make sense. So it took like a day or so for me to get water. Now, since then, I have never been without water because I learned, excuse me, I have learned the whole water situation. But that's just one example. Another example is I didn't realize how expensive school is here, because in America, you're used to school buses that come and get your
Yeah.
kids for free. You're used to, not having uniforms some places. So my son had to have a uniform
Here
here.
too, they need uniforms.
You have to buy the books, which in America you get the books for free for his age, elementary school. And so I didn't realize how much went into school until it was time for school to start. And I said, oh, so you mean to tell me I have to have a driver for my son because he needs to get to school every day. So I have to pay somebody else to take him to school. So, you start figuring things out. But I will also say everything has had an opportunity to work itself out. And so there's nothing that was too like, oh my gosh, I'm packing up and I'm leaving. Like everything has worked itself out so far.
Yeah,
so
and
I'm
you
grateful
probably
for
feel
that
super
too.
confident as a person too. You're like, man, if I got through that, like packing up my shit and going to another country and dealing with all the things that come with that, I feel like the next time we move to another country, because we've got other countries we want to check out while we're, throughout our time. And, the next, like, there's still going to be a lot of that, but we feel like that first one's probably the hardest one. Because that's the one
Absolutely,
where you really get
absolutely.
challenged in that American mindset, like you're really getting challenged on the first one.
Listen, the challenge was real. The struggle was real. I look, and not to sound all peachy keen, like my son, his second or third day here, he broke down. He was like, I'm ready to go back home. It's horrible here. I don't have any friends. Like, it was just that overwhelming feeling. But now he's like, school is fine. I have oodles of friends and, all of that stuff. So to your point, I feel like once you do it and you try it, you'll realize that it's not as scary as you think it is. And one of the quotes that I've always lived by, I always say it on my platform, is everything you've ever wanted is on the other side of fear. So anytime I feel scared to do something or fearful to do something, I'm like, okay, but what if it's everything I ever wanted on the other side? And so I just do it. And that's also how I'm a serial entrepreneur and stuff, because I just try stuff, and worst case
Yeah,
scenario,
we're all
I
just
learned a
making half the
lesson.
shit up as we go along, guys.
Pretty much. No,
Not really, but in the beginning, yes, kind of.
not really. Yeah. I mean, they say listen, it's all about the reps. Once you have the reps in, you become an expert. And so even with me moving here, right, there's people that's been here for 20, 30 years that I know that are expats. Of course, they're going to know more. They're going to do more, that type of thing. But I'm now getting my reps in. So now I'm going to be the one that's 60 something helping a 30 something year old move here. Like, oh yeah, because I have a few people like that I call my aunties and uncles. I'm like, oh, auntie, who do you have for this? Who's an electrician?
Oh, yeah,
Who's
we're
an-"
like that
and
too,
I'm
yeah.
going to be that point person. Right. I'm going to be that point person soon.
No, like
so
literally
I'm just
in a
like,
month probably, because we're already that point person for a lot of people.
Right. So my point is, you got to get your reps in, right? And even if you move somewhere and it's not what you thought it was, guess what? The world is huge.
Massive.
The world is huge. So just do the same steps, try another place. It's
Well,
fine.
that's a perfect place to put a pin in this. Thank you so much for coming on to talk about your experience moving to Jamaica. I love these interviews because I always learn so much, especially when it's a new country that I haven't interviewed somebody who's in that country yet. I always learn so much. So thank you so much.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And it was fun. Shoot, if you want to have me back for part 2, because there's a lot that I didn't talk
No,
about.
girl,
I'll be more
I'm
than
sure there will
happy
be a
to.
part 2, and there'll probably be a part 3 on your podcast. And with the trend I'm seeing, you're like the 3rd or 4th one that I've seen from our finance group from back in the day leave the country. So a lot,
Everybody's
everybody's
exiting.
exiting. Yeah. And when the finance people leave, like
Yeah.
we said in the beginning, it's time to pay attention.
Right. Follow the lead. No. But anyway, thank you, Amanda.
All right, guys, thank you so much for being here. Give it a like, leave us a comment below, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we have coming out on this channel, including more interviews with expats all over the world. And we will catch you guys on the next one.